Let's get right into it. This isn't about creativity tips. This is about physics. We're going to dissect the hidden forces that determine why some ideas manage to break through and reshape entire fields, while most, even the really brilliant ones, just seem to disappear. And this is the core signal we're looking at today. See, it's not a failure of imagination that we're dealing with. It's a quiet, structural replacement of what's new with what's already known. So that brings us to this central paradox. In a world where practically everyone is striving to be original, why does so much of what we see, so much of our creative output, feel, well, convergent? Now, this is the question that really haunts experienced creators, founders, and strategists. You see it in your field. You might even see it in your own work, right? It's that nagging sense that despite all the effort, we're all just drawing from the same well. Today, we're going to understand the actual physics behind that feeling. Okay, so the first force at play here is what we can call the gravity of familiarity. Think of it like an invisible, systemic pull that's constantly dragging our ideas back toward a common center. Now, the common belief is that this convergence happens because people are just intentionally copying each other. But the reality is way more subtle than that. See, our brains are actually wired to equate what's familiar with what's true. A recognizable pattern doesn't feel like a copy. To our brain, it just feels correct, it feels safe, and it feels intuitive. This is the familiarity bias, and it's really important to see this not as some kind of creative flaw, but as a cognitive default setting. Our brains are optimized for efficiency, and you know what? The most efficient path is always the one that's paved with things we've seen before. And this bias, it doesn't just operate on an individual level, it scales. And this is where you see the systemic outcome. When everyone's brain defaults to the familiar, you get idea convergence on a massive scale. Entire industries, from advertising all the way to tech startups, start churning out what you could call safe originality. You know, ideas that are just different enough to feel new, but similar enough to feel comfortable. True novelty, it gets filtered out before it even gets a real chance. This bias gets amplified by our second force, the architecture of input. It's not just about how your brain is wired, it's about what you're feeding that wiring. Because at the end of the day, what goes in is all you have to work with on the way out. We love to believe that originality is a function of pure effort, that if we just think harder, we'll produce something groundbreaking. But the reality is, your inputs, the articles you read, the formats you see, the references you absorb, they predefine the boundaries of your solution space. Your creativity doesn't just start from a blank slate. It starts from inside a box that's already been built. We call this the input constraint. Basically, you don't think freely. You are a remix engine. Your output is always, and can only ever be, a recombination of what you have consumed. Originality, then, isn't really about creating something from nothing. It's about the novelty of the combination. And the outcome of this is just profound. You see creators in design, media, and tech start to unknowingly reproduce the exact same structures because, well, they're all consuming the same inputs. This is how trends become self-regenerating. The algorithm feeds you what's popular, you absorb it, and then you create your own version of it, which in turn feeds the algorithm. It's a perfect closed loop. Now, our third force directly challenges one of the most sacred myths in the creative world, this idea of total freedom. The assumption is that to be truly creative, you need a blank canvas, no rules, no limits. But in reality, total freedom often leads to the most generic, low-effort solutions. And why is that? Because it removes the tension. It removes the necessary pressure that forces the brain to find a new way forward. Without a problem to solve, the mind just defaults back to the familiar. This right here is the key. Pressure is what forces novel combinations. Originality isn't born from some peaceful state of inspiration. It's a byproduct of navigating conflict. This mechanism is called constraint conflict. A truly new idea is often the elegant, completely unexpected solution that resolves the tension between two or more opposing forces. Things like, we need it to be both premium and accessible. Or, it must be incredibly powerful, but simple enough for a child to use. That conflict, that's the engine of originality. So these three forces, familiarity bias, input constraint, and constraint conflict, they create the system that we all operate in. And the most original creators, they don't overcome these forces through sheer talent. They understand them. They shift their focus away from the self and onto the system. So this is their mental orientation. First, they audit their inputs relentlessly. They know their output is a remix, so they meticulously curate their source material. Second, they interrogate their environment. They're actively seeking out productive constraints, not just coasting on familiar patterns. And third, and this is a big one, they detach their ego from the output. The idea isn't a reflection of their personal genius, it's a product of a system they've intentionally designed. And that is the fundamental shift. The goal stops being about having a brilliant idea. It becomes about architecting a system of inputs, pressures, and constraints, where original ideas are the inevitable byproduct. You're no longer the lone genius. You're the designer of the engine. So that leaves us with a few questions to think about. First, take a hard look at your own work. What are the patterns, the formats, the assumptions that you are unconsciously repeating? Second, be really honest with yourself about your inputs. What is the intellectual and creative diet you're feeding your mind every single day? Because that is the raw material for everything you will ever create. And finally, instead of asking, what new thing can I invent? Try asking a different question. Given your unique constraints and your unique inputs, what could you remix into something the world has never seen before?